The advocacy for doing theology with Asian resources is to deny this assumption of converging concept, but is instead to enrich and enhance their original identity. Based upon this self-understanding of being a hyphenated identity of Christian in Asia, theological methodologies developed in Asia to manage the local resources for their theological construction are simultaneously different from those developed from Western tradition. The task of the mission of PTCA, thus, is how to theorize the so-called non-Christian cultural resources in Asia. And this is indeed become one of the major contributions that PTCA has offered to the theological world in past 30 years. Three significant methodologies were proposed from Asian theological colleagues to do theologies with Asian resources. They are all concentrated on drawing contribution from Asian cultural resources for a vital and relevant theology to be established in Asian context. The first one is storytelling method, proposed by C.S. Song, who is advocating story. Song has considered that theology is story of people, which tells the passion and hope of people who struggles to understand the meaning of life through their faith in loving redemption of God. He argues that God has done redemptive works in creation through all cultures, even the so-called non-Christian cultures. Asian Christians are therefore obliged to articulate an Asian theology coming from the womb of Asia. And while Asian way of thinking is more intuitive and story-oriented, which is different from the Western way of logic and rational, which have been influenced by the Enlightenment. Stories are reflection of people's experiences out of their struggling or their suffering, anguish and hope. Therefore, they are the vital source for theology to grasp the people's struggling and hope. Song thus argues that stories and cultures are not something outside people, but they are people. Theology has to take people, women and men, their life and death, their ongoing joy, despair and hope as its essence and purpose. Stories thus have been considered the most relevant resources for theological construction. While taking story as resource for doing theology, C.S. Song has also proposed a storytelling method for theological construction. It contains that telling stories involves storytellers' identification and imagination. Story therefore act to merge one's identity. Christian storytelling derived from their twofold identities, where bring together biblical story and their cultural stories to critically weaving each other for a new story to be told with healing and hope. The second one, cross-textual reading method, introduced by R.G.D., the second dean of PTCA, who is also a scholar of Hebrew scripture. Taking the plural religious context in Asia, R.G. has argued that Christian scripture in Asia cannot be read isolating from texts of other religious scriptures in the region. He therefore proposed the method of cross-textual reading of the scripture, making Asian resources as text A and biblical resources as text B. He suggests that a cross-reading over these two texts are a mutual and critical illumination. This cross-textual hermeneutic is also introduced to solve the problem of conflict between Asian identities with their new inheritance of Christian identity. The third one, reconfession method, is a contribution of this writer. Reconfession method considers that the nature of theology is none other than a critical reflection of one's faith, meant to respond to a particular context that church and its believer confront. Faith reflection to this writer is a process of confession that involves critically both cultural and the gospel elements. Gospel and culture are not separate entities, but are mingled together with each other. Epistemologically speaking, gospel can only be perceived through its cultural form, their value structure and meaning orientations. Thus, there is no gospel without culture. Speaking from Christian view of creation, all creatures are existing under the sovereignty of the Creator God. It is therefore no culture is exempt from the creative elements inherent from God's creation act, and thus no culture without gospel.